daddy long shuffles. Is he taking a mulligan? Is that what we're seeing? Because it looks like Buddy has had his hand for quite some time.
I believe we are seeing that. Well, we'll confirm that in a second. But yeah, AJ is going to 6 cards here.
AJ's a boss.
Yeah.
Going to 6 is nothing to him.
So out of the black-red control deck, my guess would be, and tell me what you kind of think about this, is that there's the black-green control deck has been very good against creature decks, but one of the issues it's been having is that it has trouble with some of the pure control decks because it doesn't have access to cards like Rakdos Return, which a Jund deck typically does. And it looks like, instead of playing cards like Thragtusk, he's more, looks like he's trying to play red cards to maybe give himself a little more of a control game.
Yeah, I definitely could see that. He is crutching pretty hard on the Rakdos' returns because other than that, his only card advantage, 2 Disciple of Bolas can get there, and 3 Sign in Blood. Yeah. So he's using an awful lot of 1-for-1s and then try to have a big impact on the game with a card like Olivia, Rakdos' Return, Desecration Demon, or Disciple of Bolas.
So we see here both players just trading lands for the first turns. Basic land for Buddy, and as we've seen with a lot of the decks in the format, he has a fair number of basics in his deck. He plays 13 basic lands, probably, again, a reaction to Burning Earth.
Yeah, absolutely. And if he wanted, he even could play Rakdos Keyrune, but it looks like he's mostly just set up to use his turn 3 on Lifebane Zombie or Vampire Nighthawk.
So both players actually trading lands for the first 2 turns. Buddy got a Mutavault online on turn 2. May have the first play of the game in a turn 3 Liliana of the Veil.
Yeah, he decides to swing with Mutavault. Liliana, not super effective. The Edict effect, not good against tokens. And the discard effect, I mean, it's arguable. It's possible his own cards are just better than his opponent's.
Right.
So
in that situation, do you ever end up casting the Liliana, or
often you just don't? Like you don't want to just play the Liliana. Like it's 2 damage, and if you're not even going to use the Liliana, like he wasn't going to Edict that turn, and he didn't want to discard.
So we see a Cavern on Vampire for AJ. That probably speaks to Falconwrath Aristocrat, and a Make of Lingering Souls. And Buddy will play a freshly drawn Lifebane Zombie.
Yeah, he just needs the red eventually. He just doesn't have any other red in his hand.
Yeah. And he actually does have the Aristocrat.
Yep.
No, so Blood Artist, gather the Townsfolk, Falconwrath Aristocrat. Actually, no green or white creature. Well, obviously no green, but no white creature in his hand.
Now, AJ doesn't have any Godless Shrine, any Plains, or any Swamp, right?
No, it looks like he just has Orzhov Guildgate.
So he actually can't play the Falconwrath Aristocrat this turn. He wanted to make sure to get that Lingering Souls in play, right. But he is also going to want to try to make sure to play around Mutavault as best he can. Anybody who opens with 3 Swamps and a Mutavault, you have to respect the possibility of a Mutilate.
So it looks like, his options here, he can go for a Blood Artist, or he can go for a Flashback on Lingering Souls as he makes this next land. He's going to go ahead and make 2 more tokens. So that brings him up to a total of 4 spirits, puts the another Orzhov Guildgate in play. Or that looks like an isolated chapel, which, because his lands are chapels and Guildgates, will still come into play tapped.
Yep, absolutely. Now we have red mana, the plot thickens.
Yes.
AJ's like, oh, I see.
Now what are we doing? It looks like a main deck Duress in Sellers' hand, and he's going to go ahead and grab that. He knows there's a Gather the Townsfolk there, and he's going to go ahead and grab it. Yep.
He still has to figure out an answer to that Falconwrath Aristocrat, but if he has a single Mutilate, he can just completely take over this game.
Yeah, AJ has drawn another come into play tapped dual land. And then we'll see Desecration Demon for Sellers. And I think this, to me, highlights one of the reasons why I really like Mutilate in these style decks, is that Buddy can continue to play into the Mutilate because Desecration Demons is a 6/6 here. It actually, it would survive the Wrath.
Yeah, it's interesting that AJ doesn't actually, if he wanted to attack, he doesn't actually have to sack it and put the counter on. He could just attack and let it block 1.
Yeah.
But he's most likely not going to do that. Instead, choosing to just tap it on Seller's turn, if at all.
Well, I think the question for AJ then is how much he...
Oh, if he wants to commit the Aristocrat.
Yeah, it's like, how much do you want to commit here, right? Because if you see all these Swamps and a Desecration Demon, that does really speak of a Mutilate.
Yep. But at the same time, you have to actually be progressing the game. Right. I mean, Buddy's at 18.
Yeah, Buddy's...
How are you going to end it? Maybe you can't play around Mutilate.
Now, is it safe to say that since, AJ is somewhat of an aggro deck and Buddy's a control deck, that extra turns here favors Buddy's deck? Or like just making the game go late? It's closer, I think, than it would normally be.
Yeah, I mean, it depends. Like, AJ does have a late game plan with Blood Artist just to drain you out. And Sellers is a little bit ahead on board, so it's possible he wants to be the aggressor.
Yeah.
But AJ decides moving all in with the Aristocrat, and
yeah, he swings 7.
hits for 7, and then he's actually threatening lethal next turn.
With the Blood Artist.
Right, but he's risking everything.
So we see on the Seller's side of the board, we do see, what is that? We do see that Mutilate.
Yeah, Mutilate will probably be very effective.
Yeah, I think if you're Sellers, because he knows, Sellers actually, thanks to Lifebane Zombie and Duress, knows that there's a Blood Artist waiting in AJ's hand. You have to think he's going to pull the trigger on the Mutilate before that can happen.
Oh yeah, absolutely. He's going to Mutilate right now for sure.
And so he swings for 3, puts AJ down to 12, and then post-combat mutilates for 3, leaving himself with an 8/8 flyer and a Mutavault, and AJ with really nothing left on the board.
Yeah, Lingering Souls will go a very long way though.
AJ draws another land. So
he has Gatherer and Blood Artist. Can buy himself a very little bit of time. The Desecration Demon gives him the sack outlet that
right
to if he goes that route, but he doesn't have a good supply of tokens at the moment. He's real short on cards, on business cards.
Yeah, so AJ does play 4 Tragic Slip in the main. He does not have any Orzhov Charm in the main. Not that he'd really want to cast one of those on a Desecration Demon.
Yeah, I mean you would. You don't want to.
Yeah, when
you
you
don't want to.
It's like,
but you got to do what you got to do.
Most of your life total right now. But he does have 4 Tragic Slips, so he does have a way to deal with the demon if given enough, if he can buy himself the time to do it. But he's in a little bit of a tight spot here.
Yeah, no question. He's just trying to, like, he's thinking about the top of his library. What kind of cards could he actually draw to get out of this, you know? Like, he can commit the Gather now, or he can also potentially hold the Gather, because next turn he's going to drop to below 5. So he could actually get 5 tokens. So he might be thinking, okay, is there some way that I could, that'll give me 5 tokens to feed the demon and the Mutavault, which looks like it is his plan.
Right, now what he doesn't know is that Buddy actually has a Falconwrath Aristocrat in his hand, so Buddy can present lethal, thus forcing AJ to tap the Desecration Demon.
Wait, a Falconwrath Aristocrat?
Falconwrath.
No, he doesn't play. I don't think he plays Falconwrath Aristocrat.
Oh, sorry. He has.
That's Olivia.
It's Olivia. Okay.
Yeah.
You're absolutely right. So now he finally does go for the Liliana, just using it to Edict the Blood Artist. That means that AJ cannot tap Desecration Demon. Buddy will swing in for 8. That drops AJ down to 5.
Gather the Townsfolk is very live. He's going to get 5 tokens that way, which is enough to hold off the Mutavault and the Demon for a little while. If he draws, more Gathers and more Lingering Souls, he can actually, he's not completely out of it yet. It's not good for him. Oh, he doesn't have the Gather.
No, the Gather was Duress.
Yeah, it was
last
Duress.
Turn.
You're right.
Like you said, he erroneously put it in the creatures column.
Yeah.
So, but Duress actually was able to take the Gather.
Yeah, so he's got a little bit of time, but not a lot, because that Doom Traveler can hold off the demon very, very, very briefly. But he needs to draw a lot of serious token making. But
Right.
it might even just be too late. I mean, Buddy has both Mutilate and Olivia.
So, yep. So, I mean, AJ's forced him to play to tap the Desecration Demon this turn. And Buddy presumably can commit more things to the board here.
Yeah, he's debating, because do you play the Olivia or not?
Or do you just, or do you swing the Mutavault? I guess
He does.
is his other option.
Yep. But he does. Debating whether or not to Liliana. Wisely chooses to do so. Figuring, well, I might want to Edict him, but if I have to play another Liliana, I would have to spend the mana anyway.
Right.
So I might as well discard it.
Yeah, it's an interesting dynamic there now that with the new Planeswalker rule. Like, in the past, you'd make that play much quicker, but because you have the option just to recast a Liliana here, it kind of makes that more of a decision.
So AJ, packing it in, going to a sideboard. What kind of things are we going to see out of AJ after boarding?
All right, well, let's see. So AJ, now knowing he's up against a pretty hard board control deck, is going to want to give himself some outs to that. He has 2 Appetite for Brains in his board, which seem pretty alive in that they can take a Mutilate, which is a great card against him. They can take Desecration Demon. They can take Olivia Voldaren, which he now has seen. Outside of that, he has 2 Sin Collectors, which he could use to try to get if he's really worried about Mutilates or other hate cards.
Oh, he surely, yeah.
Yeah. So we see those. We also see Orzhov Charm, which AJ may want an extra way to deal with Olivia Voldaren.
Yeah, definitely a possibility.
And I guess the last one would be Slayer of the Wicked. I think it's just the only vampire.
Well, no, there's also the Nighthawk.
The Nighthawk, and it can hit zombies too, right?
Right. So it can hit the Lifebane zombie, the Olivia, or the vampire Nighthawk.
That's probably good enough.
Oh, absolutely. Yep. And you said Appetite for Brains, right?
Yep. Appetite for Brains, I think, would also come in the matchup.
And then on the black-red control side, we've got Curse of Death's Hold and Bonfire of the Damned are probably the highest impact cards.
So the Curse of Death's Hold, two of them, is one of the strongest cards against these aristocrat-style decks.
Beyond that, do you think there's any? I mean, is he going to take would he possibly take out the Lifebane zombies? They can still hit things. I mean, there's white creatures.
There's white creatures. There's white creatures.
They're so fast.
They're so
all the
right.
one
That's the thing. It's the one drops. It's Doom Traveler, Champion of the Parish, and Cartel Aristocrat are the only white creatures. I don't think you can reliably say that one of them.
They're also just not very good blockers.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I could see wanting. I mean, maybe that's just how you're making room for the curses and bonfires, but it's possible that he just does a few minor tweaks, like maybe add a Vampire Nighthawk or add a Duress.
Yeah, my guess is that we'll still see the Lifebane zombies, just because when I think about the cards he wants to side out, I would say like Rakdos's return is probably more important to side out than Lifebane zombie in the matchup. You know, so, and I don't know how many cards he actually wants to bring in. Like you said, you know,
at least four.
At least four.
Not a lot.
One thing which I've actually heard some people talk about, and I'm curious what you think about this, is that if AJ is expecting a Curse of Death's Hold, which isn't unreasonable for him to expect, do you think he might board in some number of Intangible Virtues?
Absolutely. I think that's actually Intangible Virtues' primary function, is against people who are playing things like Curse of Death's Hold or Is It Staticaster. Anybody who's trying to one you at a time, right. Intangible Virtue is the primary counterplay to that.
So he has three of them in his board, so you'd say he probably brings in all three.
I would imagine. Plus, he knows that Buddy Sellers does not have things like Abrupt Decay, you know?
So he doesn't have a way to remove. He's playing black red. He can't remove enchantments.
Well, yeah, short of a Ratchet Bomb, but Ratchet Bomb's going to be solid gold against him anyway if he has it. And as it turns out, he doesn't even have it. But I mean, you can't. Every Ratchet Bomb's going to be golden against an Aristocrat deck anyway.
Right. So what is AJ? What's not good in the matchup then? He's playing against a deck with a huge amount of removal. You know, basically almost like you said, a mono black control deck. Cards. Is it less resilient cards? You know, Champion of the Parish is just one. You know, is just a creature that dies to a kill spell. Blood Artist requires other creatures. What does AJ board out for these slots?
Yeah, probably some of the just single creatures, like a creature that's just like, for instance, possibly Blood Artist, but just creatures that just are one thing on their own. I certainly haven't tested the matchup enough to know for sure, but I kind of like boarding out Blood Artist. Just because everything's going to die. Yeah,
I know against Revelation decks they almost always board out Blood Artists.
Yeah, he's got to figure that this deck is a little bit like a Revelation deck in the sense that it's got sweepers, a lot of removal, a lot of 1-for-1s.
It's going to try to kill all your things and then play something big.
Yeah, and you're not going to be able to. It's going to be hard to set up a big combo where you can have Blood Artist, a sack outlet, lots of tokens, and you know.
Exactly.
And you know, Buddy not going to be doing a ton of tweaking. He's probably going to bring in those Curse of Death's Holds and Bonfires. We're talking about I'm not even sure that I would cut some amount of Rakdos return. Maybe you cut them all, but I'm not even sure. You might even want to just keep one or two if you're on the play. The possibility of, it's pretty bad.
Yeah, I mean,
Lifebane Zombie just seems pretty bad to me too, though.
Yeah, I'm not really thrilled about either of the cards.
Maybe you just cut them all and you add Nighthawk, Duress,
extra Dreadbore.
Yeah, extra Dreadbore, just random things. I don't think you want Pithing Needle, but it depends on how much you fear Sorin, which he doesn't have.
He doesn't have Sorin. I mean, is there a reason, you know, you could needle on one of the Aristocrats?
Yeah,
but because
I don't think I would bring it.
His removal is a lot of his removal is not targeted anyway, so I don't think you do that.
No. All right, this is the part of the match where AJ goes turn 1.
Yeah.
Champion of the Parish. Turn 2, Champion of the Parish. Champion of the Parish.
Oh, gross. Those
turn
draws.
3, Champion of the Parish. Gather.
That's pretty good,
gotta grow
right?
him out of mutilate range.
Yeah. No, Champion of the Parish actually in the matchup is pretty good because it's usually outside of mutilate range. We see for AJ a turn 1 Isolated Chapel. So no
classic basic swamp go.
Yep. And AJ having the core set, the Buddy Land issue, where they're all coming into play tapped right now. He doesn't have that white 1-drop again.
So I think even when you play a little bit of red mana in your mono black control deck, if it's mono black control in spirit, like, you deserve all the good things that come with the people who keeping the mono black dream alive.
Yeah.
All these years after Necropotence and Napster.
So we see AJ actually sticking on 2 lands here. He made a turn 2 Cartel Aristocrat, but did not have a 3rd land. He has a 2nd Cartel Aristocrat in play, but as we see, he has a lot of turn 3 action that he's kind of missing. He has a Zathard Necromancer and a Lingering Souls. And right now that he's going to need some more action because he's facing down a Vampire Nighthawk cast on Buddy Sellers' side.
You can't beat mono black control. Mono black control is too strong. It's if you're playing a bunch of humans, and he's got demons who eat humans.
Yeah.
I mean, this was over before WotC ever shipped the set. I mean, but he makes is that Gather?
Yep, that's Gather. So
more humans.
2 human tokens.
More humans to sacrifice to the demon.
As you see, Buddy's hand with a lot of, he has land drops and just has a lot of removal in it. It looks like we see a pair of Olivias, we see a Dreadbore.
Yeah, but Dreadbore is just not
good
against
here.
These against these human decks, these aristocrat decks.
Yeah, I think, especially when you look at what AJ is setting up for, I think he's setting up for, if he draws another land, to immediately play Zathard Necromancer, the one that's in his hand, which is why he gathered there.
Yeah, absolutely.
But we have a card that's somewhat decent against creatures on the other side.
Yeah, from my experience at the last Standard event in Miami, I played Olivia against a lot of aristocrat decks, and if they can't Tragic Slip it, it just tears them apart so quickly because it is, just such a phenomenal way to pick off 1 toughness guys.
Alright, so we see the Olivia passing the turn. I don't think AJ has hit his 3rd land yet.
You heard it here first.
Alright.
Mono black control. It's back, baby.
Back.
It's back.
Was it the last time we saw a mono black control deck? I think last season we saw some mono black trading post decks. But you're right that, it's kind of always just hovering there in like the tier 2 range, but it's always on the fringe of a metagame.
Yeah, I mean, and it shares a lot of similarities to Jund, so it's not like it's off by that much. It's just Sphinx's Revelation. It always seems like there's just something.
Yeah.
There's something that just gets in the way of, oh, okay,
So
AJ's not going down without a fight.
Yeah, he actually does have his 3rd land here. He drew a Blood Crypt for the turn, but I think he's decided that this Orzhov Charm is more important than just getting that Zathard Necromancer online right away.
Oh, absolutely. The Olivia would just shred him. He needs to kill Olivia, and he has to just hope that Buddy doesn't have another one.
Which he does.
And AJ better draw a Tragic Slip. Or it's going to be tragic.
So I think what you're saying about mono black is you said, it's really close to a Jund deck. Oftentimes it seems like it's not that mono black is bad, it's just that there's a good reason to add another color.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen in past seasons, like mono black control be a thing briefly, but then quickly turn into blue black control that just plays sort of like mono black.
Yeah.
And obviously here, it's not even really mono black, it's black with a little bit of red.
It's playing Mutilate. I think like that it gets some points in the mono black category for saying, hey, I can play Mutilate.
And mono black control did have some success during Scar's block. I think a lot of people put too much stock into the fact that they happen to kill with Skitherix, the
Blight Dragon.
The Blight Dragon, right? Yeah. The fact that it has Infect on both that and the 3-drop. Made a lot of people consider it to be a different kind of deck, but really the play pattern was very much a mono. Yeah. So, Buddy Sellers continuing to Vampire Nighthawk the tar out of AJ Sacher.
I mean, it was playing Phyrexian Obliterator, right? It's really hard to say that you're not a control deck if you're playing that guy.
Dude, I don't know. Phyrexian Obliterator is kind of a unique card anyways. Sometimes you just put him in Suicide Black, sometimes you put him in Jund. Mostly you just put him in the Trade Binder. So AJ... Now he has his 4th line. He's picking it up a little bit.
Now, what do you think? Buddy just opted to go for Desecration Demon instead of the Olivia Voldaren in his hand that turn.
So he's got some time. The fact that he now has seen Orzhov Charm, he wants to give AJ the respect of, okay, he might have a bunch of removal.
This is a bait spell.
Yeah, and if AJ's hell-bent on Orzhov Charming things, Orzhov Charming a demon is a tough way to do it.
Yeah.
So I think he wants to put this out right now, see what kind of an impact this has on the board. and then follow it up with Olivia.
So it looks like AJ now he has a 4th land. He has a Sin Collector, a Zathrid Necromancer, I believe what is also a Cartel Aristocrat, and a couple other cards. Not sure what those ones are.
The Necromancer is definitely a fantastic way to fight the demon. But he starts with Sin Collector because he wants to make sure if there's a mutilate, it is not going down.
Yeah, and it also has, that peak effect that you said, which is really good here. Lets him sculpt his game plan.
Wow, he still has Liliana too. Yeah, no question. Lots of suboptimal cards against a token-based strategy. He just doesn't have enough to bring in.
Yeah, as we saw last game, he had that Olivia in hand. No, sorry, the Liliana in hand. He didn't even want to cast it on turn 3. I think he eventually ended up casting it to Edict a Blood Artist, and that was all the value he got off it.
Yep. AJ deciding. And it looks like he does decide not to put the +1/+1 counter on and lose a guy just to sneak through 3 damage. Or 4, depending on which guy.
Yeah.
Ooh, there's that 6th land, which means that Buddy is only 1 mana away from being able to steal things, and the same turn he pings them, but he can play Olivia and shoot immediately if he so desires. Now, Olivia's not going to get the counter, because he can sacrifice whatever creature is shot to the Cartel Aristocrat.
Right, but it still will kill things, which is the main goal. AJ, as I said before, he does play 4 Tragic Slips. You have to think they're all still in the deck because he's aware he saw Olivia game 1.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, you don't board an Orzo of Charm unless you're planning on you want more Tragic Slips.
And then we see this is pretty much all of Buddy's threats right now on the board. So AJ, if he can find a way through them, he's fine. I don't think right now Zathrid Necromancer is enough to race what's going on. He pretty much
I mean, yeah, I think if that Olivia is uncontested, AJ cannot win. I mean, AJ's behind on board already.
Yeah.
And so if you add an Olivia to the mix,
it's too much.
Anything AJ plays is going to die every turn to the Olivia, and that says nothing about the fact that he has to keep feeding this demon.
Yeah. That said, if he draws a Tragic Slip, he can play Zathrid Necromancer. He can slip.
Oh yeah.
He can slip the Olivia. I mean, he might even be ahead.
Yeah, it's still kind of a tough spot, but I think there's the slip.
All right.
And since the Olivia shot main phase, he doesn't even have to sack anything to the demon.
Yeah, that was actually that gives AJ kind of another mana to work with, right? Because normally, he'd either have to sack a creature to slip it, or he'd have to slip it on his own turn. Yeah,
AJ committing to a super low life total, figuring he just needs as much board presence as possible. AJ very experienced with this archetype. A lot of people would, just out of fear of the demon, sacrifice a creature to it.
Well, because he has the Zathrid Necromancer and these 3 humans in play and Lingering Souls, you have to think that he can keep the demon tapped for the rest of the game if he needs to.
Oh, for sure, but he does need to deal with a Nighthawk, who now has him on a 3-turn clock.
Yeah, so you see him play a 2nd Cartel Aristocrat and Zathrid Necromancer on the board, so a lot of human fodder.
Absolutely. Now he's got the demon under control. The only thing he needs to deal with is that Nighthawk that has him on a 3-turn clock. If he plays Lingering Souls, though, if it's uncontested, so there's half the Lingering Souls, but there's still 2 more.
Yeah, well, that's a pretty... Your opponent has 1 card in hand, so the duress does still manage to hit. I think question for AJ, he can use Cartel Aristocrat to deny the lifelink, because whether or not he can actually race back against the Vampire Nighthawk. I think it'll be a lot. It seems like it'll be a lot harder now that he only has half a Lingering Souls to work with instead of the entire spell.
Yep. And I don't think there's any profit in Buddy staying home with the Vampire Nighthawk. There's just this game is slipping out of control. He might need to. He might just be like, well, I can't beat the Lingering Souls, so I'm going to have to just establish control.
Right.
But it looks like AJ just has too much on board. He just has so many bodies.
I think we might even see
and unblockable.
Yeah. Do you see? We might even see just Liliana Edict here.
Yeah, just 1 less creature.
Yep.
Yep. And wait. So.
He cast and
he
hasn't
decides,
used it yet.
Yeah, he decides. Yeah, he wants to wait until his 2nd main phase to decide. Think you Edict here, but
I don't see what's to gain in really plussing it. I think, which is why I agree that you Edict. As we saw there, that human, which he sacrificed to Desecration Demon, turning into a 2/2 zombie thanks to Zathrid Necromancer. AJ actually improves his own clock right now by tapping the demon.
Now, Buddy could want to plus it with the theory being I'm going to Edict him next turn. I just want to prevent as much damage as possible. Maybe he attacks the Liliana, maybe he doesn't, but if I edict him, then I can threaten to edict him again next turn.
Right.
But you're taking an extra damage. Oh, and part of it is that he'll be upgrading a 1/1 human into a 2/2.
Mm-hmm.
So it's definitely not a for sure thing. You might just want to wait and edict next turn. Yeah, and he does.
So if you're AJ, do you kill the Liliana or do you just ignore it?
I think you wait to see what you draw, but you have to just do the math. And so, like right now, he's presenting 6, 7, 8, 9. So he can do 9 damage to Buddy, and then next turn Buddy will go to 11. AJ will get edicted and have to tap the demon. So if but AJ will have 2 lingering souls. So he actually beats the board, I think. But Buddy does have a Dreadbore also. Oh no, the Dreadbore's gone now. Yep. So actually,
he discarded the Dreadbore, right?
So he does actually have 2 Sin Collectors, a 2/2 human, a 1/1 human, and a Necromancer. Yeah, it was
Sin
exiled.
Collected. Yeah,
right,
Sin Collected.
So he beats the board. The question is, what can he actually play around? Particularly since who the heck knows what's in this Rakdos control deck.
Yeah, so AJ's going with a half attack here. He's leaving back the Necromancer.
Well, he doesn't want to because of Mutavault.
He doesn't want to trade with Mutavault.
Right, and the Necromancer is just too important to his game plan.
Right. So he
still beats the board eventually, but the thing is, there's a ton of cards Buddy could draw that are super, super, super live.
Right. As we said before, obviously like, the best one being Curse of Death Sold. He does play, more Olivias. He could even another Desecration Demon could be difficult for AJ to deal with.
Mutilate too. Mutilate would just be backbreaking.
Yeah.
So we move to Buddy's turn. Buddy has to be careful not to put a 6th land in play. Oh no, I guess it doesn't matter. His demon's already up to 7/7.
Yeah. The idea though, he has to make sure that his demon can survive a mutilate.
Yeah, absolutely.
To be fair, if he mutilates here, AJ still does get 4 zombies.
Yeah. Yep. And then he's forced using Mutavault and Vampire Nighthawk to establish control. But I think that AJ is pretty just colder than Colderson on Christmas Eve if he gets mutilated.
So Buddy has drawn a replacement Desecration Demon.
See another 2/2 entering the battlefield.
All right. So the second human turns into a 2/2. The demon should be tapped, which I think we'll get. And Buddy opts to swing with the Nighthawk. So the question is if AJ will go to 1 here or not.
Yeah, that demon does need to be tapped, but...
Wait, yeah, and there we go.
AJ blocking with the Lingering Souls token. One of the nice things is by blocking and sacking, Buddy does not gain the 2 life.
Right. AJ catching that play wisely, and then we see 4 mana for a Desecration Demon.
Does he have another demon?
He does,
Sick.
I believe. All right, so now...
It's a pretty big game.
Yeah, question whether or not AJ can sacrifice through it. Buddy did plus the Liliana without too much thought there. AJ was holding on to 1 card. It was a Blood Crypt. I think that's good for AJ right now because he's actually going to start losing real creatures.
Yeah, I mean, at some point, it's possible that the Liliana Ultimate becomes a factor.
Sure.
But I think Buddy just wants to make sure that AJ doesn't have things up his sleeve like, a surprise Tragic Slip or something.
Right. And that's pretty good. If Buddy feels like if he feels like things are under control right now, then I really like plussing Liliana. Because, then you'd want to, like you said, clear out things like Tragic Slip in case Buddy draws an Olivia. And huge draw by AJ is a second Zathrid Necromancer.
Yeah.
That's some really big game right now.
Yeah, that's... Now the question is, can he just tap the demon and bash? I mean, how many people can you bash with,
Yeah, I mean, it wouldn't be this turn, but it would be next turn where he could make an army of creatures, right?
Yeah, and he can threaten to make a lot on the end step. I mean, this gives him a lot of play.
Yeah.
Whew.
So it looks like he knows he wants to swing in with the 2 zombies and the 2 Cartel Aristocrats. The question is whether or not he wants to swing with either Zathrid Necromancer.
I think they're just too valuable.
I'm inclined to agree.
The Necromancer is the best thing and the only thing really he has going on. Now that said, he's at 3 life. against, 3 flyers.
Right.
You know, he can't stop the Nighthawk forever. He's got one more block, and it is wise of him to be blocking the Nighthawk now instead of waiting until he's at 1, so he doesn't get surprise blown out by a spot removal spell.
So what I think what he's going to do is if he swings the 4 this turn, and next turn he sacrifices first a Cartel Aristocrat to a demon, then sacrifices a Zathrid Necromancer to a demon, that to me seems like the way that he gets the most power on the board, and he'll still have a Cartel Aristocrat left to sacrifice the Spirit Token to. And we see with those, Buddy's going to go for the Mutavault on a Cartel Aristocrat. And Desecration Demon on another one.
Yep, and he decides to just let the demon block, which has the interesting effect of removing AJ's sack outlets. But it does make tons of zombies.
Yeah, so yeah, AJ doesn't... I'm interested that... So AJ had the option there to save one of his Cartel Aristocrats by sacking...
The other?
Yeah, by sacking the other.
But then he doesn't kill the Mutavault.
No, he gives the Mutavault one protect. Oh, can't have... It's from a color, isn't it?
Right.
Oh, okay, fair enough. Mutavault is in a very sneaky way, Mutavault is colorless. A Dreadbore drawn by Buddy. It's actually, well, it would hit the Spirit Token, I think. Well, yeah, there's a Spirit Token. I don't think he wants to hit his Zathrid Necromancer with it.
Now, if he hits the Spirit Token, it doesn't actually net him quite as much life. I guess, I mean, like, he's going to be able to gain 2 life anyway because he doesn't have the Aristocrat anymore.
All right, so
but
2 more
AJ
zombies.
just has a huge board now.
Yes, AJ
this
has
is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7,
zombies.
8 zombies and a Necromancer is 9 different threats, 4 of which have to get through to be lethal.
Yeah, I think this to me seems like a lethal swing.
So, like, sacks 2 of the... Let's see. Might actually... Yeah, so if he sacks 2,
yep.
and he gets 1 more zombie, he now has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 zombies facing down a Vampire Nighthawk. He needs 4 of them to get through. The Nighthawk effectively cancels 2.
So he still has 6 getting through for 12.
Right, so Buddy needs to be able to deal with 3 different Nighthawks, but he has no cards.
Yes.
He has an Edict from Liliana, but that doesn't even help because it hits the Lingering Souls token. I think AJ has the game. Very well played by AJ. I mean, that was obviously was fortunate to rip the Necromancer, but he was in bad shape and played to his outs. This is a lot of precise, sacrificing the right creatures.
All right. And it does work. AJ Sacher takes game 2, and we'll be going to a 3rd game.
That was an impressive game by AJ.
Yeah,
that was very well played.
I would agree.
So, going into the sideboard, do you think AJ might mix it up and do something a little bit different?
Well, you'd have to think if he saw, he's playing against a pretty rogue deck. So when he's sideboarding the first time, he's kind of guessing at what's in Buddy's deck. He didn't really see any cards game 2 that he didn't see game 1. Had I seen, maybe he hasn't brought in Intangible Virtues. And then he saw Curse of Death's Fault and be like, okay, I need my virtues. And none of that actually happened. He didn't know, like I said, he didn't see any board cards. So I'm inclined to think AJ will keep his deck largely the same.
Well, I think War Priest of Thune, which may already be in, but War Priest of Thune should probably be in as well if you think that it is in Buddy Seller's range to still have Curse of Death's Hold.
Right.
Interesting. He calls his deck Hell, which I can only assume is because of the fact that it's all demons and zombies and vampires and just kind of a pretty hellacious little experience, right? Like it's kind of like the pandemonium of what it's like hanging out with the Rakdos on a Friday night. Are you familiar with Ogden? Is Ogden near here?
Ogden, yeah, Ogden.
Buddy Seller's hometown?
Okay, he's from Ogden, Utah. I know that I think most of the cities in Utah are kind of all in the valley or close to it.
I'm American, so I don't know much about geography.
Okay.
But my understanding is that we're closer to California than New York.
That is true. We are in the mountain time zone, so we are closer to California.
I think that Buddy still is in a reasonable amount of confidence because he's got the tools. Like obviously at the end of that game, he drew Dreadbore, one of his weaker cards, whereas AJ drew the Necromancer.
Yeah.
Buddy, if he gets more Olivias, more curses, more bonfire, he's got a lot of really powerful tools. He's just stuck playing a deck with a lot of land and a lot of bad cards, a lot of mediocre cards. Actually, not even that much land. God, this is actually surprising to me. I just noticed he's only playing 23 land.
That's a
with
very
no
low
artifact
number.
mana. Yeah, for a deck with Desecration Demons, Olivia's, Disciple of Bolas, lots of 3-drops, Rakdos' Return. That is a Curse of Death's Hold. That is an aggressive mana base.
Well, one of the things you were saying was, when you first talked about the deck, is that it was low on card advantage. You said the only sources of card advantage it really had were, you know, Olivia or Liliana activations, or like the 3 Sign in Blood, right?
Well, you've got Disciple of Bolas and Sign in Blood to draw cards. The Olivia doesn't always give you the card advantage. Once in a while it will, from you being empty-handed or edicting enough. But mostly you're getting card advantage from things like Mutilate, Lifebane Zombies at 2 for 1, and really just going over the top of people. You know, like Rakdos' Return and Olivia can just completely win a game on their own.
Yeah, I mean, I think, yeah, the low land count is very aggressive. In a deck with, if he doesn't feel like he has enough ways to use the extra mana, it might be that he's cutting some just because he feels he needs a greater threat density. But it's a risky thing to do nonetheless.
So I appreciate that. I think if you're going to be greedy, and if you're going to play mono black, like, those two things go hand in hand.
Sure.
You know.
Yeah, so I think the only thing he has that uses extra land, like extra lands help his Olivia Voldarins and they help his Mutilate count, but I think that's about it in the deck. Like, he's not going to get into 2 spell per turn range until very late in the game, you know, at least 7 mana.
Yeah, I think the main thing with his land count is, what is the acceptable percentage chance that he has of having a 3rd land by turn 3 and a 4th land by turn 4? My experience, a deck that needs to hit 4 on 4, I wouldn't count on 23 land, but I guess it also depends on how much you think you can use Sign in Blood to fix your mana. Either way, it is working out for him so far. We're going into game 3. He's going to be on the play, and a few cards. You know, it doesn't take very many of his haymakers to completely devastate AJ's strategy. Yeah. But the weakest cards in AJ's deck are certainly better than the weakest cards in Buddy's deck. Yeah,
we saw Liliana of the Veil still being pretty weak in that game. It really seems like the trump there is with Buddy's Mutilate. You know, we were talking about a lot of points during last game that, hey, if Buddy had a Mutilate in his hand right now, you know, AJ would be really cold to it. Buddy never had the Mutilate, but it seems still to be a really relevant play in the matchup.
So here we see a good, just a good solid mana draw by AJ, giving him basically all the color stuff he needs. 3 land, and then he's got the curve of Cartel Aristocrat into Sin Collector, also a nice little curve. Question is, does Buddy want to get rid of the Tragic Slip to protect an eventual Olivia or a Desecration Demon, or the Gather just to slow down the aggression?
Yeah, I think the question would be whether or not he has an Olivia in hand. That he's leaning for the Tragic Slip suggests he has an Olivia.
Or just the fact that if he's got ways to kill all the guys,
right,
you want to get rid of the card that's going to sit in his hand and actually be a threat someday.
Right.
Either way, he decides to go with the Tragic Slip.
You see a Swamp drawn by AJ. So his hand right now, it's like has some of the pieces. You know, I always think about these humans and aristocrat style decks kind of as, you know, mini combo decks. It's like he has some of the pieces. You know, he has the Cartel Aristocrat, he has a Gather, he has a Sin Collector, but he still kind of is waiting for one of those second pieces like a Zathrid Necromancer or maybe a Blood Artist if he's kept them in to really kind of make the deck get put together.
Yeah, I think he really wants some of the card advantage type of guys like Zathrid Necromancer or Lingering Souls. It looks like we're going to have a brief pause for a little bit. There's a ruling being asked for, or a very quick judge issue.
Yeah.
Yeah, it seems like he wants to have the guys who are virtual card advantage of sorts. You know, the Lingering Souls, which is basically 2 to 4 cards, depending on how you look at it, and even stuff like Gather. You know, Doom Traveler even can be a couple bodies, particularly against a guy who's playing cards like Liliana or Dreadbore.
Right.
AJ just wants to try to commit as many threats as he can, and Sin Collector next turn, obviously, and just do a quick Mutilate, Curse of Death's Hold check. You know.
Yeah. I mean, I think what it is when I look at AJ's hand, I'm like, I like all the cards in his hand right now. There's a little bit of a piece that falls missing in that, you know, say if Buddy makes a turn 3 Vampire Nighthawk, AJ doesn't have an answer to it yet.
Yep.
So, you know, it's missing that piece. I think you said, yeah, the card advantage engine.
Yep, it's definitely it's interesting when one person's got so many of their cards that are kind of squished towards the middle of the power level, and whereas you've got somebody else like Buddy who's got some cards that are super powerful and important who take over the game, and then a bunch of mediocre cards.
Or it's like your Olivias would be the ones up top.
Yeah, Olivia, Curse of Death's Hold, Mutilate, very, very high impact cards, Bonfire of the Damned. very appropriate for a deck called Hell. And
Yeah. All right, we're going to bring you back into the booth for a second. We know the players have asked for a judge check. We don't actually have the details on that right now, but so you were saying, yeah, so there's those high impact cards, though. We're going back to Buddy's deck, which we're talking about, the black-red control deck.
Hell.
So yeah, you said he has the high-end threats, but then some of his cards aren't very strong in the matchup. You're saying, like Liliana, a lot of his removal spells are just kind of buying time.
So we're back. Everything's been cleared up. Buddy committing yet another basic land to the board.
Yep.
Here we're going to see, most likely, AJ Curve. He's probably going to start with the Gather, right? Just because he wants to play around Duress.
I think so.
And the Aristocrat could just die to anything.
Right, and he wants the Aristocrat to be protected when he plays it.
Yeah.
And he's going to Gather the Townsfolk. Yeah, if he still does have Sin Collector, Cartel Aristocrat in his hand. And we see, kind of as I mentioned before, Vampire Nighthawk, turn 3 from Buddy.
Ooh, another Tragic Slip. Very, very important in this matchup.
Yeah, there has been a Tragic Slip drawn by AJ. Question will be whether or not AJ wants to immediately off the Nighthawk, or whether you think... Yeah.
You got to do a Mutilate check. See, do they have Mutilate or Curse of Death's Hold?
Well, he does see in his hand a Sign in Blood, I believe, that was taken.
Wait, no.
But now it's a Curse of Death's Hold and an Olivia Voldarn is the two main
So now
cards.
you know he has Curse, but how much can you play around it? He doesn't have his 5th land yet. AJ does not have access to Duress, but he does have enchantment removal.
Yeah, what he does know now is that that Tragic Slip in his hand is going to be saved for Olivia Voldarn, and that information has been pretty important.
Absolutely. Now the question is, what does AJ need to do in order to prepare for the coming storm?
Yeah.
You know, that Curse of Death's Hold threatens to just completely shut AJ out of the game. He needs an Intangible Virtue or some kind of enchantment removal. And even if he just has enchantment removal, he's going to lose this entire side of the board.
Yeah, so he's drawn, it looks like another Swamp, so he has a Swamp Plains left in his hand, still has Cartel Aristocrat, right now with no answer to the Curse of Death's Hold.
And what's tough is he only has 1 black mana, so he can't go Cartel Aristocrat and Tragic Slip.
He has the Isolated Chapel, so yeah, he can do...
Does he have a black in his hand?
Okay, yeah, he has a black. He has a black. Okay. He has a Swamp in his hand.
So he could go Cartel Aristocrat, sacrifice a human, a 1/1, and Tragic Slip Olivia. He doesn't want Buddy to untap, or else Buddy could potentially shoot multiple things.
Okay. So you're saying he promised to off that. So he wants to off the Olivia right now before the untap, but that is kind of playing into Curse, right?
Yep. But I think that you can't he doesn't know
the
Buddy, and he doesn't know Buddy has a 5th land. He knows Buddy has an Olivia.
Yeah, and Olivia and double red up. So that Olivia, the unanswered Olivia is almost just as devastating as the Curse of Death's Hold.
Right. There are 2 game-winning problems, game-ending problems that he has to deal with. He happens to have the answer to one of them, so you have to just deal with that, get devastated by Curse if he has it, and so Doom Traveler,
at
least
he's playing into the Curse.
Well, he's playing in hoping that Buddy doesn't have a 5th land.
Yep.
Let's do this, he says.
Okay.
Get as much damage in as possible. Play to your outs. That is, most people would be like, oh, I got to play around the Curse and be so careful.
Right.
AJ's like, this is, if he's got the 5th land, there's nothing I can do anyway.
There's the second issue, and they're right off the top, 5th land, Curse, AJ gives his Cartel Aristocrat Pro Black. And that's
either way. I think that was a good gamble on AJ's part. I think that what's the Doom Traveler going to do for you? Once he plays the Curse, the Doom Traveler's not doing anything.
Right. AJ swings for 1, plays a second Cartel
Very well played by AJ, but Buddy Sellers very well designed.
Yeah.
Yeah. The fact that Curse of Death's Hold definitely effective if you're expecting to face Aristocrats.
So AJ's going to need going to need a way to deal with the Curse. So many of the cards in his deck are dead until he deals with it.
Now he does have access, potentially, depending on how many brought in, to 3 Intangible Virtues, 2 Oblivion Rings, and 1 War Priest of Thune.
Right.
So 6 answers, not a negligible amount.
If he brought in Zealous Conscripts, he has a 1-turn answer. Not a good one, but let me see.
It doesn't change who the Curse is enchanting, right?
Oh, okay. No, you're right. It enchants a player, so you're absolutely right. It's not opponents.
But at least the Zealous Conscript is one of the few creatures in this deck that can still live.
Die.
Like a Zethrid Necromancer and Cartel Aristocrat are the only bodies. Everything else, literal 1 toughness.
So we saw on Buddy's side, he taps out, the last card in his hand is actually a Rakdos' Return. He Rakdos returns for 5 in response. AJ Orzhov charms the Vampire Nighthawk. But that's a huge chunk of life taken out of AJ's side. He's now down to 6, but he does have the board presence in 2 1/1 Cartel Aristocrats.
Yeah, I mean, these are some pretty mediocre beats. However, at least he's making forward progress.
Buddy has to draw something eventually.
The problem is if Buddy draws anything eventually.
Yeah.
And we have a Vampire Nighthawk, and AJ is cold. I think we're getting real close to AJ's got. I mean, he's on a 3-turn clock.
Right.
He's gonna need. I mean, he's gonna need an answer to Vampire Nighthawk to begin with.
But he's gonna need an answer to everything, right?
I don't think he needs an answer to. If Buddy just draws lots of removal spells, AJ can afford to eventually, hang out. Yeah. Eventually play an Intangible Virtue or a War Priest of Thune or an Oblivion Ring, and then actually start playing Magic again.
Right. They are both playing off the top of their deck at this point, so it's not that. And actually, if he can get that curse off the battlefield, AJ does have Unlingering Souls in his graveyard.
Yeah. Yeah. Step one is probably either get curse off the table or deal with Nighthawk. Either way, you don't have very long. This Nighthawk is definitely going to be attacking every turn, and AJ's already used a lot of his spot removal. He doesn't have a ton in his deck, and he's already used
just 2 of 5.
Yeah. Well, 6 also. Slayer of Wicked will be, Slayer of Wicked would be real nice.
Yeah. Nighthawk hitting for 2. It drops AJ to 4. Buddy's up to 17. He's drawn a Dreadbore for the turn.
Doesn't do a ton, but I might play it anyway. I mean, what's AJ gonna play that's
what's
better
the better
than a
threat?
Aristocrat? I mean, I guess Slayer of the Wicked, if he draws it, is a 2/1. But maybe he figures these 2 Cartel Aristocrats are doing nothing to me anyway.
Right.
Why don't I just save it in case AJ... Like, what if AJ plays an Olivia or something? Like,
yeah,
does something crazy. AJ is a wild and crazy dude. It is very possible.
I had Appetite cast by AJ.
Turns out Buddy has no brains.
Magic players, it's time of the round. Active player, finish your turn, and there are 5 additional turns. Judges, please report for
And Blood Crypt for Buddy Sellers.
As a reminder, we've got 5 minutes. There is a 5-minute extension because of this being a feature match, so we're not quite to time in this round.
Right, so we see another land from Buddy. Right now, continuing what he's been doing the last few turns, just swings in with Vampire Nighthawk, puts AJ down to 2 life, himself can back up to 17 again. AJ with no flying blockers now facing lethal on the next attack.
Yeah, it's not good for AJ. But AJ is the type of guy who likes to keep it exciting.
AJ has drawn a 1-turn reprieve in the form of a Blood Artist that he drew this turn. That can gain him 1 life by...
Yeah.
Not ideal.
Yeah, unfortunately can't sacrifice his 2 Cartel Aristocrats in response.
No.
And have it actually gain him any life. But at least he can gain 1 life.
So he puts Buddy once again back down to 15. And he's going to go ahead and make that play. Casting Blood Artist, draining for 1.
AJ's up to 3. Buddy down to 14.
So he bought himself 1 more draw. Is there a draw that helps him? I mean, it's Tragic
Slayer
Slip,
of the
right?
Wicked.
Slayer, Tragic Slip. It has to be one of those.
Now I do think this is where if you're Buddy, you have to Dreadbore one of the Cartel Aristocrats. Oh no, you can't. No, it doesn't matter anyway. I was gonna say just because Aristocrat can't sack itself to itself.
Right. So now it takes away Tragic Slip.
Exactly.
Now it's just Slayer of the Wicked.
Yep. Anything else? I guess Zealous Conscript if you have it, or Oblivion Ring.
Yep. So AJ down to 1. His last draw is a land.
It.
So Buddy Sellers.
You mono black control.
Mono black control.
Hell.
Wins 2 games to 1. I know. What? So he defeats AJ 2 games to 1. That puts him in the 2-1 bracket. AJ at 1-2, most likely done for the afternoon.
I don't know. Well, AJ's a grinder.
Done on top 8 contention for the afternoon.
Yeah, AJ might be out here to grind out that top 16 or top 32 finish. Either way, I think AJ's here to run the Legacy circuit tomorrow. Yeah. Which we will be here again for that tomorrow.
We're actually doing a double standard this weekend.
Look what I know.
Yeah.
So I guess AJ's looking to dominate standard tomorrow.
Well, we're going to bring you back in the booth here, though. We are